Welcome to UNGA Decoded. I'm Michael Ago, senior reporter at Devex. For the next couple weeks, my colleagues and I are going to bring you inside the biggest global development gathering of the year. Skip the travel, the traffic, and the security lines, and join us for candid conversations with people at the leading edge of global development, global health, and humanitarian assistance. This is UNGA Decoded.
Being part of the solution means speaking up and be assertive with our rights. And that right is our right to a safe environment, our right to life, our right to development, and all of those human rights.
Marinel Sumook Ubaldo was 16 when Typhoon Haiyan, known as Yolanda in the Philippines, destroyed her family's home, their village, and ultimately killed more than 6,000 people in her country. That experience of witnessing firsthand the devastation of a storm charged by climate change, and a sense of obligation to those more than 6,000 people who could no longer speak for themselves, set Marinel on a path of climate advocacy. My colleague Kate Warren spoke to Marinel about how she carries that heavy weight of experience to the privileged spaces of international summits and policy negotiations, like the UN General Assembly's High-Level Week, where the voices of those most affected by climate change are still not always listened to and heard.
Marinel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you too for having me.
So, is this your first CGI UNGA week?
Yes, this is my first CGI participation, but this is my second week during the Climate Week, for Climate Week, yeah.
And what are you doing here? What the conversations you're having? What are you hoping to accomplish?
I'm really hoping that all the commitments that we will have here at CGI will be translated more into action in the grassroots communities. I feel like these spaces should have been more inclusive, that there are more voices coming from the developing countries and marginalized communities, and I am seeing just a few representation, unfortunately, and I'm very glad that I am here, but also there are a lot of stories out there and a lot of people out there who could have been part of the discussion in this kind of spaces. But I feel like this is not more inclusive. I feel like a lot of people here are actually CEOs of big companies, which makes sense because they can actually pay the registration fee. But how about if I am just, an ordinary citizen? I am not invited to be a speaker, but I have a heart and a passion for climate justice, and I really want to make a change, and I'm already doing something in my community, but I don't have the money to be part of this kind of spaces. How can I be part of the dialogue if I don't have the economic opportunity? So I'm really looking forward at how they will make these spaces more inclusive to people and more inclusive to the youth, and not just to a few.
And so you were actually on stage here with Hillary Clinton yesterday and talking about your personal experience. And I believe you mentioned how most of the impact of climate is felt by countries like yours in the Philippines, even though you're a very, very minor contributor. I know you had a stat maybe you can throw out and remind me of the percentage. But you've actually had personal impact from this, right? And I think it was Typhoon Yolanda in 2013 in the Philippines really impacted your community. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how that has led you to be here and to be advocating for youth, for climate, and for countries like yours?
Yeah, I started in 2012. I was trained to be a child facilitator. At that time, I was thinking that, climate change advocacy is not really like something that we're talking about in community. So I felt that it was so interesting for me because then we could be prepared for what's coming in 50 years, in 100 years. We're referring to that as if it will be coming in 50 years. So we were already educating the communities, going to remote schools to talk about the basics of climate change and what we can do to adapt and mitigate its effects. And then Super Typhoon Haiyan happened in 2013. at that point, I know that there is something wrong. This is the strongest typhoon ever recorded. My father was then a 59-year-old man. He said that it was the first time that he ever experienced that kind of monstrous typhoon. It killed more than 10,000 people in our province. It destroyed thousands of houses, including my own, and it affected 14 million people across 44 provinces in our area. And it's just, I have seen like dead bodies. I have seen, it was my near-death experience, and I guess being here representing the voices of those who cannot be here and who are not here anymore because they were not fortunate to live. I guess it is already my moral responsibility to share those stories, and I am glad I'm given the platform, but also, as I always say, there's more stories out there. So seeing how my community responded, seeing how my community struggled, it kind of driven me to do more because I don't want to experience another super typhoon. And I felt that we could have done better more in responses and in preparation. So we lobbied with our government. We sent petitions even to our to the Commission on Human Rights in the Philippines to make sure that those who are responsible for this type of crisis will be accountable, will be held accountable, because it is really important that we are not just, because we're not just victims. We can also be part of the solution. But being part of the solution means speaking up and be assertive with our rights. And that right is our right to a safe environment, our right to life, our right to development, and all of those human rights.
The world is facing an unprecedented global food crisis. Here at Devex, we're following the state of food insecurity around the world and the solutions that are needed to overcome it. I'm Teresa Welsh, senior reporter, and I'm also the author of Devex Dish, a free weekly newsletter bringing you a comprehensive look at everything that matters in the world of food. Each Wednesday, Devex Dish will be your guide through the interlocking policy, infrastructure, climate, agriculture, nutrition, and human rights issues remaking the way food is grown and distributed. Visit devex.com/newsletters to subscribe and get your weekly update on the race for a sustainable global food system.
For a lot of the international organizations that are here, international NGOs, people working with UN or even USAID and funding agencies, a lot of them are operating or working in the Philippines. What would you say to them on how they can work with communities like yours better? How you can become a better part of the solutions? What advice would you give to them?
I guess for international non-governmental organization or any international organization working in developing countries, I would say that when you respond to disasters, I guess it is better not to bring in expats. I would really say that we need more economic opportunities for the locals. And during disasters, there are a lot of abuses happening, and that is between expats and the people there. And we don't want to intimidate more the locals. And when we go to the communities, we don't just tell them that this is our program and this is the things that we will be doing in your communities without even getting the opinions, without even doing consultation with the community. I would appreciate it if before they go to the community, they would have a preliminary meeting with the key leaders in the community. That is kind of courtesy to the communities that, hey, we are not here as like your heroes. We are here to facilitate change. We'll be your lead, and we are just here to help you. Because a lot of our organizations, though I really appreciate all the goals and the vision of the organizations going to the communities, but with the steps that they are taking in reaching that vision, we are losing sight of what's really important in the community, what are the things needed in the communities by themselves. And in that process, we forget that the communities should be there sitting during the planning, during the implementation, and even post-implementation of projects.
Yeah, so a lot of people in our community have been talking about decolonization of aid. Localization is a term often used, just meaning shifting more decision-making resources directly to local communities. So how do you think about those conversations and the work that you're doing within your community, and why that is so important?
I mean, like, just making sure that the local people are part of the discussion is already a big thing, because as myself, I have been a beneficiary of so many aids already, from disaster aids and everything, and I felt that I felt that I am just part of the conversation if they're getting testimonial from the locals. And I guess for us to make sure that we're creating an impact, the local people should have the sense of ownership to the project that you are implementing in the communities. And that when you go out of the community, you are actually assured that the projects that you started will stay in the community and it will be community-led. And I guess just being part of the baselining is very, very crucial, right? But our participation in the project implementation does not end in the baselining. It should end after, like, everything, the post project implementation. So I always appreciate when my fellow men are included in decision making processes, especially on issues that affect them. So
you don't want to just be a photo with a quote in a brochure.
Yes, and be sent to donors.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so we're leading up to COP27. There's been a lot of talk about it actually being held in the global south and African continent this year. That the importance of including low and middle income countries in the conversation, in the solutions, should be front and center. There's some debate about whether or not that will come to fruition. But as we look ahead to COP27, what do you hope to see come out of that, and what conversations would you want to be part of?
I'm really keen to seeing how they will institutionalize funding for loss and damage. They could have done that even before, and they promised in COP26 that they will talk about it in COP27. More than ever, we need funding for loss and damage. Some of the countries, some of the places already reached the hard limit adaptation. We cannot adapt anymore. We're just losing lives. We're just losing livelihoods. We're just losing our communities. We cannot adapt anymore if we can't even have food in our table. And we need reparation to the countries that are bearing the brunt of a disaster we didn't even cause, of climate change we didn't even cause. And I just feel I feel really sad to the communities, and even to my own community is now sinking because of inaction of our leaders. And I know climate solution does not come with, conferences. It is after the conference, what we do after the conference. And I am hoping that we will have more outcome that is really community friendly, and that all the things that they will be talking in COP27 will be translated to community efforts. Because we cannot just meet every year and then the communities don't even know what are the things that we are talking about in this kind of conferences, and if it's even for them, or if they have even access to the opportunities there.
Well, what gives you hope?
I guess what gives me hope is my fellow youth. They have been doing so many amazing things, and what gives me hope is the thought that there are spaces like this one that are given to the marginalized groups to put our stories out there. That people still believe in the kindness of humanity. People still believe that we can still do something collectively. And I just hope that, I also said this during the panel yesterday, that I hope spaces like this are things that I needed when I was younger. That would give me hope, that would give me optimism, positive vibe, that we will be having a better world in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Marinel, and we hope for that too.
Thanks for listening to UNGA Decoded. We'll be bringing you more interviews from the UN General Assembly throughout the next week. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do share it with friends, family, and colleagues, and you can also leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. If you've been to UNGA and have some thoughts, or if you just want to share some feedback on this episode, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on social media @Devex and @AlterIgo.